Hey everybody, this is my thoughts on the beta for Wrack. This is a first-person shooter by Final Boss Entertainment. It's been in development for some time, and it's actually kind of weird. I forgot this game existed up until Final Boss Entertainment actually sent me an email like, hey, would you like to do a video on our game? So I was like, sure. Why does this sound familiar? So I look it up. Come to find out, I remembered it because Total Biscuit did a video on the alpha, I think 2 years ago. And it looked interesting, but I didn't have access to any sort of beta version or anything at the time, so didn't really think much of it. And so now that it's nearing release, it's supposed to have the final version released on the 30th, and I do plan on doing a review of it as soon as I can. Hopefully it will be within a day or two of the game actually being released in full. If not, hopefully within the week. If not then, hopefully within the next week. My schedule has been very crazy as of late, so I can't really promise anything there. But I will get the review done as soon as I can, of course. At any rate, the game itself looked really interesting. They're going for this arcade FPS style, very reminiscent of something like Doom, actually. Only it's obviously in 3D. They do have cel-shaded graphics, which are very interesting. Everything is very bright, very colorful, and it's very well appreciated. You have no idea how much I actually enjoy a game being in a cel-shaded technique. You see, it's something that's really underused. The only games I can think of that use something like it offhand are the game 13, which I will do a review of as well, eventually. I don't know when, but sometime. And Okami. Now, I've never actually played Okami, but I like that art style, that very cartoony, bold lines, bright colors, flat shading, that sort of thing. I really like that art style, and in this particular case, it gets pulled off pretty well for the most part. Sure, that means that you're not seeing a lot of super high definition textures or crazy accurate modeling that's got such ridiculous amounts of tessellation it's not even funny or something like that. But what you got is a very charming art style that I think is going to have quite a bit of lasting appeal just because it's cartoony. Cartoony stuff is going to age a lot better than realistic stuff, just period, end of story. I mean, you look back at a lot of the games from, say, the 90s, and they still look great because they were going for that more pixel art, cartoony art style, and that just works a lot better for aging than, say, 3D modeling from 96 or so. And so it looks really nice, and it runs really well too. I did see some occasional frame drops on my non-gaming PC, but that PC is actually really hit or miss when it comes to games. So that didn't really surprise me. On my gaming PC, at least 60 frames a second all the time, pretty much no drops whatsoever. It's a very polished beta right now. The sound design is pretty good all around as well. They don't really have any voice acting per se. There's a bit of it here and there, and there's not really much to speak of there. It's mostly grunts and that sort of thing. The sound effects are pretty beefy. I really like the sound of the shotgun in particular. It sounds like a friggin' cannon almost. It's really nice having a nice beefy shotgun again. It's just something I've missed from old school games. And even the pistol actually sounds fairly beefy, so they've done a good job with that. The sound effects work very well for the most part. I did notice some sounds are a bit stock-ish, but they work pretty well for the most part, so it's nothing really noteworthy. The music's decent. It's nothing particularly memorable, unfortunately, but that could just be that it's in beta and they haven't really implemented all that yet. So we could see a lot more music tracks later on that sound a lot better. Now, admittedly, again, I'm only a couple of levels into the game, so it's not like I've heard all of the music there is to hear in the game, but it's decent, it works pretty well. But then we come to the story and the gameplay now. I'm not really far enough into the story to really know anything. In fact, I kind of skipped through it a bit just to see how the gameplay was. It doesn't seem like it's really an important part of the game. And that's fine, because that's what they were kind of going for. They're going for that arcadey FPS feel, and a strong plotline doesn't really fit in with that style of play very well. Now, it is told through these storyboards almost. They're flat images with text that pops up over them, and you get a decent amount of those between levels, but other than that, the story seems somewhat in the background, and the focus is really on the gameplay itself. So what is the gameplay? Well, it's a first-person shooter. It's arcade style. You start off with the Hyper Blade, I believe it is called, which is an extremely powerful melee weapon. And then you quickly get access to a pistol and a shotgun, and that's basically what I've used thus far. There's also the Pulsar that you get, but it seems like there aren't all that many weapons in the game. I only counted in the options menu, I think 5. So that could be an issue when we get to the full game. We'll have to see. Hopefully they'll add in some more stuff, but if it's not in the beta this far in, it may only be 5 weapons available, which is a bit of a shame. But they seem to have covered all their bases. You got, your pistol, your shotgun, you got your melee weapon, you got an interesting energy weapon, and you got what is basically a bazooka. And I mean, if you're going to do an arcadey, old-school style FPS, you gotta have some sort of rocket launcher. It's just not going to work otherwise. From what I understand, rocket jumping actually is in the game too, so that's another nice feature, but I am not there yet. I haven't gotten that far in. So we'll see when we get there. The level design is surprisingly large. There's a lot of stuff in these levels. I've basically played it for about an hour and a half, and in that time, I've really only managed to fully complete level 1 and pretty much all of level 2, although I have died a few times, so that doesn't really help. So the levels are pretty big, and there's a lot of stuff in them. There's even secrets in there. Now, some of those are pretty much in plain sight, and some of them are just, oh, you pressed this button, I wonder what that did. Things like that. But it's nice that they throw that in there, and it's nice to have score in an FPS again. Yeah, you get points in this game. You get points for combos, you get points for finding things in the world, like sacks of money and things like that. And you can just watch your score go up and up and up. There's leaderboards and everything. It just feels awesome to have something like that in an FPS all over again. Now that said, the actual gameplay is fairly limited. There haven't been all that many enemy types thus far. Again, I'm not very far into the game. This could change dramatically later on. But they really aren't that big of a problem to deal with thus far. Hopefully I'll be seeing some more difficult enemies later on with some different styles to them. There's already been a single boss in the game, and the game pretty much tells you how to beat said boss, so it made it really easy. I haven't found a way to turn off tooltips or anything like that, so that could just be me not finding the option in the options menu or something like that, but I would really appreciate it if they had some way to turn the tooltips off. That would be greatly appreciated, because it kind of made that fight way too easy, and even then it wasn't that hard to figure out. But hey, boss fights in an FPS again. Haven't seen that in a while. It's great. And the movement speed is really fast. Even for an arcade style FPS, it's really fast. So you feel like you're going at breakneck speed the entire time, getting those super crazy combos going together, dodging enemy fire, all that sort of thing. It's very smooth. That movement speed being fast, you can stop on a dime. And it really does feel like an old school FPS, just a bit faster than usual. Actually kind of reminds me of something like Rise of the Triad. But suffice to say, the game is very fast-paced, it's very frenetic. They have a habit of throwing a lot of enemies at you at once when you do certain things, just like in an old school FPS. The level design is rather large, there's a lot of things in them, there's secrets and all that sort of thing. You can get really satisfying combos going when you get crazy amounts of enemies taken down. There's even some platforming in there. Admittedly, I don't really like platforming all that much in my FPSs, but it works out okay in this one, actually. And it's just really great to have an old-school style, arcadey FPS in this day and age, when pretty much everything is insert generic modern military FPS here. it's just incredibly refreshing. And I'm looking forward to how the rest of the game plays out. So, thus far, my experience with the beta has been very, very positive. That said, I do have some misgivings about it. They do have a level editor in here, so it is entirely possible that if there's a shortage of levels, I don't really know how many they have in the game, but if there is ever a shortage of levels, the community will pick them up and just make out a ton of fantastic levels. That's entirely possible. It's also entirely possible that the community for it will be rather small and we actually won't get all that many levels. Who knows? Well, that remains to be seen. There's no multiplayer in the game. Something like this almost screams for multiplayer. So, if you go on their website, the FAQ actually says the multiplayer is planned for the sequel if they ever get there. So, we'll see what happens with that. I really do think multiplayer would be a big draw for this thing if it was this fast-paced and frenetic and just wacky fun. The lack of weapons also bothers me. I really like a diversified arsenal in my FPSs of this style, and frankly, they pretty much got bare bones here. It's nice that they have a variety of weapons that do actually feel kind of different, but at the same time, I would like to see something less standard, if that makes sense. Some crazy weapons here and there would be very appreciated. Something that was unique, if you could find something unique to put in there. I mean, if you just straight up copied all of Doom's weapons, that'd be fine. But I just feel like 5 weapons is a bit bare bones here. Granted, I've played FPSs with fewer weapons before, like Wolfenstein 3D, for instance, which only had 3 weapons, if you didn't count the knife. So, I don't know. Again, feels bare bones, but that's not necessarily a terrible thing if they put a lot of effort into those. And thus far, it feels like they have put quite a bit of effort into those and made them feel different, have their own uses, and that sort of thing. Now, that said, I do feel like the difficulty could be an issue as well. It's not hard, and that's my issue. You see, ammo is plentiful. So are health items, actually, and so are armor items. And so, I never really feel like the enemy poses all that much of a threat. Now again, I am not very far into the game, so it could be that later enemies are really powerful and really hard to take down, and that ammo gets more scarce the later you get in the game. I really don't know. We'll have to see. But that is a concern going into the rest of the game. Other than that, it's surprisingly fun, even for a beta. It's pretty much finished in its current state. There are some things they need to add back in. The cutscenes, for instance, aren't completely finished, things like that. But other than that, it's a pretty complete beta experience. I will have a video on the full version out as soon as I can, of course. And thus far, I'm enjoying it. Despite having a lot of things that are kind of bare bones and having some misgivings about what the final product might be, it's pretty promising thus far, and I'm very curious to see where it goes. It's very nice to have an old school style arcadey FPS again. So, hopefully it works out pretty well. Thanks for watching.